Mr. and Mrs.
Yeah?
Those are two blokes, Mr. and Mr. It's a big Swiss.
Look, why don't you just shut your fat mouth, Les?
This is the story of how Sean Wilson walked away from Coronation Street in 2005 after 20 years playing Martin Platt, and why it took him years to admit the real reason behind his departure. The official version claimed mutual agreement, a character needing rest, a natural break after 2 decades on the cobbles. What actually happened was Wilson refusing point blank to film a storyline so controversial that he'd rather lose his job than put his name to it. And when 2024 brought him back for what should have been a triumphant return, another crisis would destroy everything in just 8 minutes.
Bug off back down south! Hey, what are you doing?
Picking a fight. You want to pick a fight with someone? Pick a fight with me.
Yeah, well, stop it.
Understanding that 2005 departure matters because the pattern would repeat itself nearly 20 years later. November 2005 rolls around, and Martin Platt is packing his bags for Liverpool with his new girlfriend Robin, wrapping up 2 decades in Weatherfield. ITV's statement at the time kept things diplomatic, talking about mutual agreement and the character needing a breather, while Wilson himself mentioned wanting more time with his 2 kids and feeling overwhelmed by the show's increasingly frantic production schedule.
Cheat on my daughter, would you? Don't deny I've been seeing you in your dirty little...
Turning 40 had given him perspective on where his life was heading and what mattered most. All true, but nowhere near the complete picture. What the public didn't know was that 12 months earlier, producers had called Wilson into a meeting with a proposal for Martin's next major storyline. The plot would see Martin unknowingly getting involved with a girl under 16, and when the truth came out, the character would end up doing a 6-week stretch in prison. Wilson's answer came immediately and without room for negotiation. Years later, he told the Mirror exactly what he said. "I said, straight away, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be castigated as a person, and as a dad, I didn't want my kids to be picked on because of it."
You all right?
No. Just been jumped on by a flaming lunatic.
Look, do you want to lift to the hospital or something?
The calculation here wasn't about artistic merit or protecting Martin Platt's character development. Wilson had a son and daughter at home, and the thought of them facing abuse in the playground because their father had chosen to film scenes like that simply wasn't acceptable. No amount of money or job security could justify putting them through it. Wilson tried offering a compromise, suggesting they cast someone else for the controversial material, but the producer wouldn't budge. Martin Platt had to be the one, which meant Sean Wilson had to be the one, and there was no wiggle room in that equation. Months passed with the standoff unresolved until May 2005, when Wilson got called into another meeting. 20 years of service, hundreds of episodes, one of the show's most recognizable faces, and they told him he was no longer needed.
Well, that's the type of bloke you are, innit? Lower than a stinking sewer rat.
Do you want to say that again with my fist in your mouth?
Looking back years later, Wilson's reflection on that moment reveals quite a bit. "When they told me they were getting rid of me, they did me a favor." Now, the storyline viewers actually watched in those final 2 years stirred up enough controversy on its own. Martin's relationship with 16-year-old Katie Harris created an uproar both in Weatherfield and in living rooms across Britain, with Katie being the daughter of Tommy Harris, who'd helped pull Gail from Richard Hillman's death trap in the canal. Tommy called Martin a pervert. Katie's brother Craig tampered with Martin's car brakes in December 2003, and the whole mess ended with Katie taking her own life in April 2005 after everything fell apart.
It was you were behind her back. It was you got Katie on your side. And you were meant to be a mate.
But that storyline, featuring a girl who was legally of age, was clearly a watered-down version of what producers had originally wanted, and Wilson's refusal to cross that particular line cost him everything he'd built on the street. Understanding why that decision mattered so much requires knowing where Sean Wilson came from and what the job meant to him. Born the 4th of April 1965 in Ashton-under-Lyne, Greater Manchester, Wilson grew up dealing with his parents' divorce, his mother's remarriage, and enough tension with his stepfather that he left home at 16. His A-level art had opened doors toward graphic design work, and he'd even landed a position at an advertising agency before discovering they mostly wanted him to fetch coffee and run errands. That lasted until he quit and signed up for a youth training scheme building sets at Oldham Coliseum Theatre, which led to training at Oldham Theatre Workshop and eventually a year working community theatre around Manchester and up at the Edinburgh Festival.
Look on your dad's face with a carving knife in his hand. Well, I tell you, in his head, that'd be no chicken he's slicing into. Oh, no.
Getting into Coronation Street took 3 separate attempts and 3 different characters. But when he auditioned for Martin Platt, at just 19 years old, something clicked, and on the 28th of January 1985, he walked onto the cobbles as a fresh-faced 16-year-old school leaver, starting his first day at Jim's Cafe. Nobody imagined he'd still be there 20 years later, having racked up roughly 1,500 episodes. Those early days saw Martin Platt as background texture more than central character, the young lad working the cafe, while bigger dramas played out around him. But producers clearly spotted something in Wilson's performance, because gradually, Martin's screen time expanded and his storylines deepened. Everything changed in 1989, when Brian Tilsley got murdered that February, leaving Gail widowed with Nick and Sarah Louise to raise on her own.
Well, I do as it happens.
Why? What are you going to say?
Well, you'll have to wait and see, won't you, Mrs. Platt?
Martin, still barely out of his teens on screen, started offering comfort and support, and what developed between them wasn't your standard soap romance. Gail was 10 years older, which bothered plenty of people, and Brian's mother, Ivy Tilsley, reacted with absolute horror at the match. The relationship survived all that opposition, leading to their wedding on the 27th of September 1991, when Martin officially adopted Nick and Sarah Louise. Not that Nick ever let him forget who the real father was, a tension that would simmer throughout their time as a family. Christmas Day 1990 brought David into the world, though he nearly didn't arrive at all after Gail decided she wanted a termination because Martin seemed too young for fatherhood. Martin stopped her last-minute dash to the train station and convinced her they could handle whatever came next, which turned out to be one of the show's most emotional storylines that year. The 90s delivered their share of chaos, including Carmel Finnan, a fellow nursing student who developed a dangerous obsession with Martin and spent months manipulating Gail into believing they were having an affair and expecting a baby together.
Well, last year we had a stripping policewoman, bedpan drinking competition, get the idea?
Then came Christmas Day '94, when Martin had a one-night stand with nurse Kathy Power at the hospital staff party, a betrayal he actually confessed to, and that Gail eventually managed to forgive. But forgiveness ran out in 1999, when Martin spent 6 months carrying on with nurse Rebecca Hopkins, played by Jill Halfpenny. And here's the detail that matters most. He only came clean to Gail after Rebecca had already ended things, which suggested he might never have confessed if the affair had continued running smoothly. By 2001, the marriage was over and the divorce papers were signed. March the 14th, 2003, brought one of those moments that defines a soap opera's entire decade. serial killer Richard Hillman strapped the Platt family into his car and drove them straight into Weatherfield Canal, attempting to murder Gail, Sarah, David, and baby Bethany all in one go. Martin and Tommy Harris dove into the freezing water and dragged everyone out of that submerged vehicle while 19.4 million people watched from home. That viewing figure remains the highest-rated Coronation Street episode of the entire 2000s, proof of how deeply viewers had invested in these characters over the years. Martin Platt had transformed from background cafe worker into a core member of the show's most important family, which makes what happened next feel even more uncomfortable because the man who'd risked drowning to save Katie Harris from that canal was about to fall in love with her. Katie was 16, Martin was pushing 40, and the nearly 20-year age gap had people reacting with disgust, both in Weatherfield and in actual living rooms across the country. Tommy Harris, Katie's father, and supposedly Martin's friend, physically attacked him and used the word pervert to his face. Katie's brother Craig got so disturbed by the whole situation that he sabotaged Martin's car brakes in December 2003, causing a crash that could have killed him. The storyline pushed every boundary it could find and left viewers deeply unsettled. This wasn't some random teenager Martin had met at a bus stop or in a shop. This was the daughter of the bloke who'd helped save his family's lives, and the betrayal of trust, combined with the age difference, created something genuinely provocative. April 2005 brought the devastating conclusion when Katie got pregnant and had a termination after hearing some false rumor about Martin, then killed her father Tommy with a wrench before taking her own life by destroying her insulin and drinking sugared water because she was diabetic. Viewers at home found it harrowing to watch, and for Sean Wilson living with that storyline day after day, knowing producers had wanted something even more controversial that he'd refused to touch. The weight must have been crushing. Late 2005 finds Wilson out of work after 2 decades building the Martin Platt character, his reputation now tangled up with one of the soap's most divisive storylines. The question becomes, what do you do after that kind of exit? Acting work came in steadily enough for a few years, with roles in Silent Witness in 2006, Casualty that same year, Waterloo Road in 2008, and a couple of appearances on Doctors in 2006 and 2009. Dancing on Ice in 2006 gave him a different kind of exposure when he partnered with ice dancer Marika Humphries and finished somewhere around 5th or 6th place. But Wilson's real passion project was developing quietly in the background. Training at Northcote Manor in Blackburn in 2009, a proper Michelin-starred restaurant, introduced him to master cheesemaker Bob Kitching, who taught him traditional Lancashire cheesemaking techniques that went back generations. Wilson and his childhood friend Mark Revell, who'd been in the band The Icicle Works, founded the Saddleworth Cheese Company together. Now you might assume a soap actor making cheese sounds like celebrity vanity nonsense, something to keep him busy between auditions. But Wilson approached the craft with complete seriousness, developing products with brilliantly northern names like Muldoon's Picnic, How's Your Father, and Smelly Hapeth, that went on to win gold at the World Cheese Awards 4 years running from 2011 through 2014. His blue cheese beat Gorgonzola in its category, which tells you everything about the quality he was producing. By 2017, the prestigious Guilde Internationale des Fromagers had inducted him as a member, and he'd taken up a position lecturing in cheesemaking at Reese Heath College in Cheshire. The transformation from soap star to respected artisan cheesemaker wasn't something anyone could have predicted back in 1985 when he first walked into Jim's Cafe. but Wilson had made it happen through genuine skill and dedication. March 2018 brought a brief return to the cobbles for 4 episodes during a difficult storyline involving his on-screen son, David. Martin flew in from New Zealand, offered the support his son needed, then emigrated there permanently with his partner Robin and daughter Charlotte, giving the character a dignified exit while leaving the door open for potential future returns. February 2024 arrives, and Helen Worth announces she's leaving Coronation Street after 50 years playing Gail Platt, which meant the producers needed to give her a proper send-off. Who better to feature in her final storyline than Martin, the ex-husband who'd been part of so many defining Gail moments over the decades. The invitation to return thrilled Wilson when it came through, and he signed on for 10 episodes without hesitation, telling reporters, "It was great to be invited back to Coronation Street again, to contribute to Helen's exit story. Playing Martin has been a joy since day one, and in a way, I'll be slipping back to where I left off." July the 24th, 2024 brought the official announcement, with filming beginning immediately. Wilson was back on the cobbles, back in Martin Platt's world, reconnecting with cast members he'd known for decades, and by all accounts, those first 2 weeks went smoothly. Roughly 10 scenes got filmed, with Wilson sliding back into the character as if the years away had never happened. Then August the 1st, 2024 arrived with an email that would destroy everything. The email informed Wilson that someone had made a historical allegation of a sexual nature against him, and within days he found himself sitting across from 3 ITV executives for a meeting that lasted exactly 8 minutes. During those 8 minutes, Wilson heard that someone had accused him of putting his hands up a woman's skirt, that police had contacted ITV about it, and that the case had been referred to the Crown Prosecution Service. The network had to cut his contract immediately to protect their cast. No negotiation, no discussion, just done. Wilson sat there in shock, trying to process what he was hearing. "I'd been there 21 years, and there had never been an allegation made against me," he said later, watching his reputation collapse in less time than it takes to boil a kettle. August the 16th brought ITV's public confirmation that Sean Wilson had stepped down for personal reasons, 2 carefully chosen words that implied this was Wilson's decision, that maybe he was dealing with family illness or some other private matter. Nobody outside a tiny circle knew what had actually happened. Behind the scenes, Wilson's world was falling apart. His much-anticipated return got scrapped completely, with every scene he'd filmed heading straight into the bin. The storyline needed a complete rewrite, and reports suggested John Thompson got brought in to fill the gap in Gail's exit plot. Legal fees were piling up into the thousands, while social media trolls started harassing him and making assumptions about why he'd suddenly left. Wilson hadn't even told his children what was happening, because how do you explain something like that? How do you tell your children that you've been wrongly accused of this? He asked later. October the 25th, 2024, brought Wilson to Longside Police Station for a voluntary interview where he learned details that would prove absolutely crucial. According to Wilson, the police version of the allegation bore no resemblance to what ITV had told him in that 8-minute meeting. Rather than hands up a skirt, officers described it as a single touch on the backside over jeans dating back to 1997. What's more, Wilson claims police told him they'd never contacted ITV about the case, and it couldn't have been passed to the Crown Prosecution Service because they hadn't even assigned an officer to investigate it yet. 4 months passed with Wilson living in professional limbo, his career destroyed, unable to defend himself publicly while the investigation ran its course. November the 21st, 2024, finally brought the call he'd been waiting for when police informed him there would be no further action taken. The case was closed and he was cleared. Wilson cried for the first time in 4 months. Greater Manchester Police issued a statement confirming that after senior detectives had reviewed everything, the suspect had been released with no further action, and they'd kept the complainant informed and supported throughout the process. Finally able to speak publicly, Wilson gave an interview to The Sun on Sunday that ran on the 1st of December 2024. His description of that 8-minute meeting at ITV left nothing ambiguous. My reputation was ruined in just 8 minutes, my whole world blown apart. I had no idea who had made this complaint or anything about it, but I lost my job. It's been hell. Reflecting on how quickly everything can fall apart, he added, "This whole entire thing has been unbelievable. No matter who you are or where you work, you are just one call away from ruin." Helen Worth had been supportive throughout everything, telling him, "I'm very sorry. This is the situation, and forget everything. Don't even apologize to me. You've had a lot to go through." Sally Dynevor reached out as well, along with many fans who'd never stopped believing in him. But none of that support could undo the professional damage. Those scenes with Helen Worth would never be broadcast, and that 10-episode arc contributing to one of Coronation Street's most significant departures in 50 years of the show simply got erased from existence. So here we are back at the original question about what really happened when Sean Wilson left Coronation Street. Except now, we're looking at 2 departures, and both of them were far messier than the official statements ever suggested. In 2005, the departure wasn't just about wanting more time with his kids or reassessing his priorities at 40, though those factors played a genuine role. What drove Wilson away was refusing to participate in a storyline he found morally unacceptable, one that could have damaged both his reputation and his children's well-being in ways he wasn't willing to risk. Looking back now, Wilson's assessment seems spot on when he said, "When they told me they were getting rid of me, they did me a favor." What followed was a successful second career as a respected cheesemaker, winning international awards, teaching the craft to new generations, creating something meaningful outside the television fame bubble. But that 2024 return should have been completely different. That should have been a celebration, a chance to help Helen Worth exit gracefully after half a century, to give Martin Platt a proper role in Gale's final chapter. Instead, it became another devastating departure, this time not because of a storyline Wilson refused, but because of an allegation that led nowhere after investigation. Wilson's 59 now, cleared by police, rebuilding his reputation through determination and the quality of his work in both cheesemaking and various food television programs. His company continues producing award-winning cheeses. He lectures at agricultural college, and he creates portraits and sculptures in whatever spare time he can find. But those scenes with Helen Worth are gone forever, and that opportunity to properly close the Martin and Gale chapter for viewers who'd invested decades in watching them simply doesn't exist anymore. The parallels between 2005 and 2024 jump out immediately, because both times Wilson found himself in an impossible situation through no real fault of his own. Both times the official explanation masked something far more complex, and both times he lost his place on the cobbles. Here's the difference though. In 2005, Wilson made an active choice to protect his principles and his family, even knowing it would cost him his job, while in 2024, the choice got made for him, and he spent months unable to defend himself while his reputation hung in the balance. For viewers of a certain age, Martin Platt remains part of the Coronation Street landscape regardless of what came after. They remember him comforting Gail after Brian's murder. They remember the wedding in '91. They remember David's Christmas Day birth. And they remember that desperate canal rescue in 2003 when 19.4 million people watched Martin risk his life to save the Platts. Those memories endure despite complicated storylines and sudden departures because Sean Wilson brought genuine warmth and believability to the role for 20 years, making Martin Platt feel like someone you might actually know, navigating the same messy relationships and difficult choices that real people face. And now, with the full truth finally out about both departures, maybe there's room for a more balanced appreciation of Sean Wilson's career, not just as the actor who played Martin Platt, but as someone who drew clear lines about what he was willing to do for his art, who rebuilt himself when the acting work dried up, and who survived a devastating allegation to come out the other side, cleared but permanently changed. The cobbles of Coronation Street have watched countless actors come and go over the decades, some leaving on their own terms, some getting written out, some returning multiple times. Sean Wilson's story stands apart in its complexity, in the gap between public perception and private reality, in the way the truth kept getting buried under official statements. At 40, turning 41, he revealed why he really left in 2005. At 59, he's revealed what happened in 2024. Both truths prove more complicated, more human, and more interesting than the official versions ever suggested. And sometimes that's the most compelling story you can tell. Not the neat narrative, but the messy, complicated reality of what actually happened behind the scenes when nobody else was watching.